Everybody, this is Sherry at djsundry.blogspot.com, and I have a card that I wanted to show you today. Now, I will have to admit right off the bat that I'm a little disappointed. I just decided to try out the Cricut Craft Room just a couple days ago, and I had so much fun designing this card in the Cricut Craft Room. Unfortunately, my Imagine is not up to date, and it is taking forever to get all the updates ready, and so I decided I had to improvise. So while my Imagine's trying to update with its firmware and software and all the updates it has to do, I decided to kind of improvise. So let me show you what I used on this card. To start with, I used my new Spellbinders Nestabilities, and this is Labels 2. And from this, I did not use the smallest one, but I used the next two up. And I have already stamped and been able to get this ready. I use from Candor Designs, I use the Scripture Sayings, and I use Saved by Grace Through Faith. This is a card for my husband for Easter. And so what I did is I cut the larger size in a brown cardstock. I'm not even sure where I got that brown cardstock. And then I took Vintage Cream cardstock from Paper Tray Ink, and I stamped my image with just my black Excelsior. And then I around the edges with Vintage Photo Distress ink. And then I also put a little bit of antique linen in there just to kind of mesh it all together. I also distressed around the edges of the brown with the Vintage Photo. And then I already have it ready to go with my pop dots on the back. In fact, let's just go ahead and move, or the foam adhesive is what I used. And so I get mine from Michael's at Recollection. So let's just go ahead and use that. Now, I wanted to make a shape card, and I had it, like I said, I have it all designed on my Imagine. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to do an Easter egg. So I went to my Doodle Charms cartridge on page 89, and I used the Shift Egg feature. Now, this is the trick. I did not, because I had to do this on my own, I turned the real dial size on because I wanted to make sure that I had the egg the size that I wanted it for the shape card. So real dial size on, I used the egg, and then I cut it 3 times. The first time what I did is I took just a plain piece of white cardstock. That's what I usually cut first when I'm trying to figure out sizes and stuff. And I cut the egg at real dial size at 5.5 inches, and I tried it in my envelope to be sure that it would fit. And that's just a piece of plain white cardstock. And then I took another piece of brown cardstock. Sorry, it's got glitter on it. And I cut it again at 5.25 inches, so it would go like that. And then I have from Tim Holtz Ideology Papers from the Paper Stash Craft Resist. I had some paper that that has some music notes in the back. Now this is the Resist paper, and I'll show you exactly what I'm going to do with that in a little bit. I'm trying to make this kind of a vintage flavored card. And I went through and I used my Ripe Persimmon Distress ink, my Forest Moss, as well as my Seedless Preserves, and I just distressed the back side of it. And I'll show you a little bit more about that in a minute, because there's a little bit more work I want to do to that piece. But then remember I had this 5.5 inch. Well, that's obviously not a shape card. So what I did is I used that as a template, and I cut a piece of Paper Tray Ink vintage cardstock at 5.5, or well, I made it so it would be a 5.5 inch tall card by 4.25. And then I used this as a template, and I lined it up on the back side like that. And then I took my pencil and I traced around the edge, leaving a bit of overhang. If you see from here, you can see I overhung it a little bit on the back, so then I could fold my card. I had already pre-scored my card and folded it and had a nice crease here. And so when you open it up, you have your shape, your shaped Easter egg card. And then what I did, and I know this is kind of a messy distressing, but I took the vintage photo and I distressed it. Now for this piece and this piece, before I distressed it with the vintage photo, I took my distress tool, and I'm just going to show you how to do. You can use your fingernail, you can use a fingernail file. I think I used to use emery boards. I have a whole bunch of emery boards stacked around here before I got this little tool, but this just kind of gives it that distressed look on the edge. So I just wanted to go around that. And now, even though I have all my other colors in here, now what I want to do is I want to take my vintage photo. I'm just going to make sure that I have no paper fibers because I've had messes with paper fibers before. Take my vintage photo and I am going to distress the edges of it. Now on the one that I used, that I designed on my Imagine, I used the doodle charms also. But the other thing that I did is I took, I don't remember if it was Imagine More or Imagine More cards, and I made my own music note paper. Another fun thing to do would be if you happen to have an old, I would have loved to have had an old hymnal that I could tear into, and I'm going to have to go get one. My husband actually collects old hymnals, but I would be in the doghouse if I started tearing into the old hymnals. But I wanted to get an old resurrection hymn and use that instead, but unfortunately I didn't have that. Now I'm stepping away for just a second because I forgot to grab a paper towel, because I wanted to show you, now this is resist paper. So now if I go back over this with my paper towel, you'll see some of the distressing that I did start to come off, so that you can see those notes a little bit better. So just something kind of fun, and the notes resist the ink because they have the way they have prepared the paper. So that's the bases of our card. So let's go ahead real quick and put our card bases together, and then we'll get it all decorated. I decided to kind of go over the top with my decorating on this more than I normally do. I just felt like it's just a really fun card, and I wanted to just really make it nice for my husband, and I just thought we'll add some vintage flavor to it. There we go. There's the first layer, and then oops, and there's the second layer. I'm using a lot of ATG on this one because I am planning to embellish quite a bit, and I don't want to I don't want my base pieces coming apart by the time I get all the embellishments on, because it's going to actually be a fairly heavy card, and normally I mail my cards and this time I'm not, so I'm going to go a little bit crazy with my embellishments. Now I did see that I kind of made one mistake here, but I think that'll be okay. So I'm going to position my stamped sentiment kind of towards the top here, just like so. Saved by grace through faith. And then now we get to start playing. I pulled out from, you may remember from my haul video a few weeks ago, I got these Prima flowers, and then I also got these lavender Prima flowers. And so I pulled those out. And then I went through, I wanted some leaves, and I really don't, I would have loved to have had some, like some gossamer type leaves in here, and I couldn't find any in my stash that really worked. And so what I did instead is I went through and I found this leaf, and this is why there's glitter everywhere. This is kind of like a glittery leaf that I had picked up at some closeout at some point, and it's actually made by Making Memories. And I'm going to use that. And it, you know, at first it's really not, it wasn't me, and I didn't think I really cared for it. But then I got to looking at it, and it really kind of plays right in with the vintage flair of this card. So I think it'll be quite pretty. Boy, I could almost just do it just like that. I hadn't even thought about that. Let's see. We'll play with it for a minute. Maybe I'll just leave it. I hadn't really planned on doing that, but that's the first time I've looked at it quite from that angle, and I kind of like that. I thought I would just put some of those in there. You know, after all of that, this is when you see the creative process happening. I think I'm going to just leave those two. You know, we like to do in threes, but I'm going to consider my leaf my third element there, and just see what that does. I really kind of just like it. I had played with it in quite a different light before, or in a different way, and added a whole little, let's see, maybe I will go ahead and put my little lavender flowers in here. Tell you what, those Tim Holtz tonic scissors are sure nice. I really like how well they just cut right through that little bit of wire. You know, I think I am going to put the lavender, and there's purple is my favorite color, and I think that lavender just reminds my husband of me. All right, so now that we have that all figured out how we're going to do it, let's glue it down. I just pulled out my Scott's quick drying adhesive, and we'll just start with that. Now, if you haven't used this before, it does dry very quickly. Not so quickly that you don't have time to play with it and position it, but it does dry very quickly, which is nice when you're trying to finish a project. Plus, it also dries clear. So that's really an advantage too. And so now I'm just going to reposition these, because now that I've got my basic, I can kind of pull them off one at a time. So we'll just start. Now these Prima lavender flowers that I love so much, I'm kicking myself that while I was there that I didn't get more than one package, because I know that I'm going to miss that, because I really, really like them. But they just really add that little, just that soft color, but they're also vintage. You know, they just remind me of an old vintage kind of feel. There we go. And we're almost done. And I know if you've watched very many of my videos, you know that I don't do a lot with a lot of bulk and flowers, but I just really wanted to make this particular card just really pop, both because of the message that I'm trying to portray and just because it's for someone awful special. All right, so that will kind of dry all up for me, and it'll dry clear. And there we have it, Saved by Grace Through Faith. And there's my Easter card for my husband. So thanks for watching, and have a great day.